expression, life is a game? That's true. Life is a game, and it's a game that you can win. But all games have opponents, and the game of life is no exception. So if you want to win the game of life, it's important to know who your opponents are and how to defeat them. In today's class, I have 3 goals that I want to accomplish with you. First, I want you to understand the critical importance of knowing who your opponents are and developing a plan to defeat them. Second, I want to identify your major opponents and discuss how they attack you. And third, I want to help you apply what you learned today by asking some questions. These questions will help you identify the major opponents that you are facing in your life right now, and the answers you give will help you take immediate action to overcome them. So first, let's talk about the importance of knowing who your opponents are and creating a plan to defeat them. Personally, I think it's helpful to approach your opponents in the same way that a professional sports team does. When a team prepares for a game, the coaches and players study their opponents in tremendous detail. They watch game films, they study their opponent's tactics and tendencies, and they identify their opponent's strengths and weaknesses. They also try to anticipate what strategies their opponents will use to try to defeat them. And finally, once they thoroughly understand their opponent, they develop a game plan. The bottom line is that professional sports teams approach their opponents in a very thoughtful and methodical manner. In the game of life, you have 2 major categories of opponents. The first category is what I call universal enemies, and I refer to these as universal enemies because everyone on the planet battles them. The second category is what I call personal opponents because these opponents are unique to your individual life. Today we'll look at 5 major universal opponents, and these include negativity, fear, laziness, ignorance, and unwise instinctive behavior. The first enemy is negativity. Negativity is when you have a defeatist attitude about the problems in your life. It's when you dwell for too long on the problems instead of seeking solutions. Being negative makes you feel miserable, and secondly, it keeps you from solving the problem. Now don't get me wrong, when bad things happen, you're going to experience sadness and anger and disappointment, or a combination of all 3, and that's okay because these are natural emotions. But the problem comes when you focus on these emotions for too long. How long is too long? Well, it all depends on the situation. If you're driving and someone cuts in front of you, if that bothers you for about 30 seconds, that's okay. However, if 2 days pass and you're still complaining to your spouse about what happened, that's way too long. On the other hand, if your boyfriend breaks up with you and you're depressed for a few weeks and sad for a few months, that's probably okay. But if a year passes and it's still difficult for you to get out of bed in the morning, you have a serious problem. You're going to need to let it go. Now, maybe you'll need to get some professional help, but the bottom line is that you need to move on with your life. Your second major enemy is fear, and ironically, fear is a healthy emotion because it helps you to survive. For example, if you're out hiking and you see a grizzly bear, fear prevents you from getting too close to the bear. The problem with fear is that it's overly protective. Fear wants to keep you in your comfort zone, but to move forward in life, you need to take some risks. Now, I'm not talking about impulsive or careless risks. I'm talking about well-calculated risks. For example, if you want to change your career, you may have to risk leaving a steady job. If you want to date someone, you're going to have to risk the fear of rejection by asking that person out. Getting out of your comfort zone is frankly uncomfortable and sometimes even terrifying. But I think that if you look back at your life, you'll find that some of the best things that ever happened to you came at times when you took some risks and stepped outside of your comfort zone. Your third major enemy is ignorance. And as you may know, ignorance does not mean stupidity. It means a lack of knowledge. To maximize your success in life, you need to gain the best knowledge you can in the most important areas of your life. But here's the incredible irony about ignorance. You'll often be ignorant of the fact that you're ignorant. We all have blind spots where we simply don't realize that we're uninformed. In fact, I actually started Life Success University because of 2 experiences where I discovered that I was woefully ignorant in topics that were critical to success in life. Let me briefly share those experiences with you. In approximately 2004, my mother told me she was concerned because one of my younger brothers was having a problem with verbal communication. I decided to help him by going to a local bookstore and getting a book called People Skills written by Dr. Robert Bolton. As I glanced through the book, I decided that I too could benefit from reading it, so I purchased an additional copy for myself. As I read the book, I was amazed to learn about how much I didn't know about effective interpersonal communication. And the irony is that before I had looked at that book, I didn't realize that I needed it. I thought I was a really good communicator. In other words, I discovered that I was ignorant of my own ignorance in the field of interpersonal communication. At around the same time, I purchased another book, this one called The Motley Fool Personal Finance Workbook. And as I read this book, I was absolutely blown away by how many things I didn't know about basic personal finance concepts. Once again, I discovered that I was ignorant about my own ignorance. Your fourth major enemy is laziness, and the best way to overcome laziness is to make an absolute commitment to doing something and then doing it whether you feel like it or not. You should view this commitment as sacred. You should never break that commitment except for three circumstances. First, an emergency occurs. You were going to go to the gym, but your daughter gets hurt at school, so taking care of your daughter is a greater priority. The second circumstance is when a more important task arises unexpectedly. You were going to go to the gym, but an important meeting at work gets moved up at the last second, so you temporarily postpone the gym visit to attend the meeting. And third, you are physically or emotionally exhausted to the point where it is completely unwise or completely unproductive to keep the commitment. For example, you made a commitment to go to the gym, but you become ill with the flu. Now, you need to be careful about this third exception because laziness will lie to you. It's going to say, you're too tired to do that now. Go ahead and do it another time. And my recommendation is when this happens, you should at least try what we're going to do for a few minutes. And you'll often find that by starting a task, you'll become energized once you begin. Your fifth enemy is your natural instincts. Actually, it's more accurate to say that some of these instincts are your enemies because instincts are usually good. They help ensure your survival, but the problem with instincts is that following them isn't always in your best interest. As a human being, you have a highly developed cerebrum. The cerebrum is the thinking part of your brain. The thinking part of your brain gives you the ability to judge whether or not your instincts are correct. For example, if your boss fires you for no good reason, your instincts may tell you to punch her in the face or start screaming at her. But the thinking part of your brain reins in your instincts. It realizes that you could go to jail or have difficulty in finding another job if you acted on your instincts. Likewise, your instincts may tell you to eat that second piece of cake or engage in promiscuous activity. But once again, the thinking part of your brain can override your instincts. But you need to stay on guard because your instincts are strong and they are primal. Your instincts will be screaming at you to eat that piece of cake. Meanwhile, your cerebrum is going to be quietly whispering that it's not a good idea to eat that cake. So when you have two competing voices in your head, and when you're looking at that cake and you're thinking about how good it's going to taste, you're going to want to listen to that voice that is going to give you temporary pleasure. But in circumstances like these, you need to show courage and wisdom so you can triumph over your natural impulses. The second category of enemies are personal enemies because they are unique to you as an individual. For example, perhaps you are physically disabled. Maybe one of your parents was emotionally abusive and it harmed your self-esteem. Or maybe you never received enough schooling to get the kind of career that you want. Everyone has personal obstacles, and some people have obstacles that are greater than others. But we all have them. And your job is not to focus on the obstacles. Instead, your job is to accept them for what they are and then do everything that you can to overcome them. So let's recap what we've learned today. First, we've learned that life is a game, and it's a game that you can win. But to win the game, you need to understand your opponents, and you need to create a plan to overcome them. Second, we've discovered that you face two major categories of opponents: universal opponents and personal opponents. Universal opponents are faced by everyone and include negativity, fear, laziness, ignorance, and unwise instinctive behavior. Personal opponents are obstacles that are unique to you as an individual. Now it's time for you to apply what you've learned today by answering some questions. As each question appears, please pause the video and write down the question and your answers on a piece of paper. Now I realize this is going to take some extra work, but you have a lot to gain by making this investment. These questions will help you identify the major opponents that you are currently facing in your life, and they will give you answers so that you can create a plan to overcome these obstacles. The first questions are about negativity. First, what things in your life do you currently have a negative attitude about? Second, how can you frame these situations more positively? And third, what actions can you take to overcome or improve these situations? The second two questions pertain to the enemy of fear. First, what fears are holding you back the most in life? Second, what things can you do to overcome these fears? The third two questions are about laziness. First, what thing have you been most lazy about that bothers you the most? Second, will you commit right now to stop being lazy and to doing this activity? The fourth two questions are about ignorance. First, what one thing could you learn that would make the greatest difference in your life? Second, how can you go about learning this? The fifth two questions are about your natural instincts. First, what impulsive behavior causes you the greatest problem in your life? And second, what can you do to overcome this impulsive behavior? The final two questions are about your personal enemies. First, what are the three greatest personal obstacles that you face in your life? Second, what specific things can you do to overcome these obstacles? I hope these questions have helped you to identify some of the major obstacles that you face, and I also hope they've given you some solutions. But understanding your obstacles and knowing how to defeat them isn't enough. This knowledge is meaningless unless you take action. I want you to be extremely aggressive in implementing these solutions. Your life is too short and too precious to let the enemies of success bully you around. They want to deprive you of happiness and success and every good thing that life has to offer. Their goal is to keep you down until the day that you die without ever having lived the powerful and amazing life that you are capable of living. Don't give your enemies that satisfaction. Fight back and do everything that's in your power so that you can rise above and win the game of life. That's it for today's episode. I hope that you found it to be enlightening. And if you think that any of your friends or family could benefit by watching, please be sure to send them a link. I'm Dave Perry. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time here at Life Success University.